Hello, and welcome. Today, we are going to chat about what is coherent pluralism. But first, a reminder, this is brought to you by Root and the Root Fellowship, which is a community of world-class systems thinkers looking to understand and build the future. If you want to join us, check us out at root.co. And whoever you are in the world right now, I'm just wishing the best for you, wishing the love for you, reading or watching or viewing this, wherever you may be, hoping for that you're having a good day. Okay, today, coherent pluralism. This is week 3. And within coherent pluralism, we're going to chat about today, what is it? Next video, we're going to chat about how these modern movements embody coherent pluralism. And then in our final video, we'll talk about actually using coherent pluralism in your day-to-day life. So today, we're just going to say, what is coherent pluralism and why is it important? It's a relatively simple video today. I don't need to do air quotes. It's what is it and why is it important? Okay, so what is it? I love thinking about this image by my friend Audra Jacoby to really understand coherent pluralism. It's putting on multiple different lenses, trying to understand the world from lots of different perspectives, from a pluralistic, amount of perspectives, while still creating coherence among them. So in more formal terms, coherent pluralism is the epistemological stance to see from many perspectives while still creating coherence among them. So let's break that down. By epistemological stance, remember that we mean epistemology is how to understand the world. How do we understand the world? And remember, it's different than ontology, which is what is true, and that was networkism. And it's different than ethics, which is what is good, and that is bentoism. So this is all about epistemology, how to understand the world. And stands, when we say epistemological stands, what we mean is that it's a process, that it's a perspective on perspective itself, that it's not some kind of truth to understand, like 2 + 2 = 4. Instead, it's an underlying intention that we can take with ourselves to try to do our own sense making. And then here, to see, it's an epistemological stance to see. I think seeing is a very helpful verb and metaphor here. The lenses. Always think about lenses when you think about coherent pluralism. And here we're talking about see from many perspectives, so that's the pluralistic piece, while still creating coherence among them. So it's that balance between many perspectives and coherence among them. I love this quote by Oscar Wilde, which really shows it. Everything in moderation, including moderation. So yeah, don't be too crazy about stuff. Think about stuff in moderation, be pluralistic, but also include moderation in your moderation. Sometimes it's okay to be crazy. Sometimes it's okay to create coherence among all the pluralism. So this has this great balance vibe that coherent pluralism also has. Okay, so now let's talk about coherent pluralism in action. What it would feel like. Or I'll just give you an example of myself with coherent pluralism through my life. And I like to think of coherent pluralism, and we'll talk about this more in a later video, but as a progression of adult development that we all go through. So again, another beautiful image from Audra. For me, you can imagine me as this guy here. I, myself, and everybody, all other humans, were created at birth, and we were taught the way the world was by our parents and by, our upbringing, by society, by our schooling. And those are the lenses that they gave us. They said, this is what things are like. Here's how arithmetic works. Here's how to be nice to others. Honesty's pretty good, whatever you were taught as a kid. And I was taught those things. I was taught stuff like, be late. Being late is okay. My family was late all the time. And as I grew up, I started to transition more to the second image here, which is recognizing this lens that I had grown up in. This usually happens around teenage years or college where you're like, whoa, I see the world differently than others, and this is how I was built, and that's interesting. But I don't need it to be that way. You can kind of zoom out and see, instead of seeing through your lens, you can view your lens as an object in and of itself. And things like therapy and meditation really help with this. And for me, with the stupid example of being late, I learned, oh wow, being late is not okay. I should be on time more often. I also learned things like, in high school, I would call people gay in a derogatory way. And that was obviously bad. And as I grew up, I started to realize how that could be painful for others. But when I was a child, it wasn't like I was taught by my parents to do this, but various things, both with my friend groups and the internet and all these things made that I said that. And then I was able to start to see that as, that's not that great. And then finally, this third picture here is really coherent pluralism, where in the second one, you're rejecting your lens. You're saying, I'm not like that anymore. I'm not going to be late anymore. I'm an on-time guy. And then in the third image, you have pluralism there, where you both have your new lenses that you're starting to put on, and you recognize your childhood and your socialization as an important part of you. And so you're in relationship to all these different lenses. And you also see other people as people with their own lenses on the world and their own development in childhood and throughout adulthood. So that is what coherent pluralism looks like. And for me as a person, day to day in action, it looks like checking my lenses and seeing, checking my biases, checking to see what things from my childhood I'm still bringing with me, trying to understand other people's lenses, where they're coming from, that kind of thing. Okay, so what does coherent pluralism feel like in your body? And as an example here, before we go into this is an example of coherent pluralism, where instead of just teaching you mental things and trying to help mentally the whole time, no, I mean that would be maximalist and an extremist around mental. We also need to experience things somatically and within our own bodies. So that is the hope of what we're doing here, is to be pluralistic with respect to learning modalities. Okay. So how does it feel in my body? Powerful. My body feels a sense of energy. And my body also feels a bit of fear, both around my own background and trying to understand my own upbringing and my own programming, and also in helping others and helping them in an intentional and respectful way to help people understand these really intense things about themselves. And that can be really scary. And so I'm trying to recognize my own inadequacies and the fact that I'm talking to you over the internet, and that you may have past childhood things that are more difficult than mine or difficult in their own ways. And I want to be cognizant of that as I teach and talk about coherent pluralism. So take it at your own pace. Interactive time. What does coherence mean to you? And what does pluralism mean to you? Second question, how can one be too coherent or too plural? What are you? I know for me, for example, I can be too plural. Like, ooh, what about all these things? It's like, focus, man, focus. Okay, number 2, why is coherent pluralism important? There are 3 big reasons why we're talking about it and why it's important. First, it is how a responsible individual does sense-making in a networked information ecosystem. That's a lot of big words, but what it means is if you're on the internet, you have to consume things from a lot of sources and also, bridge coherence among them. It's not good to just consume from one feed, but to instead, try to keep your sense-making, coherent and plural. Second, it helps us empathize with others. You can be pluralistic and really try to deeply see where others are coming from. And then finally, C, it's a healthy mindset towards mindsets, which means that instead of saying, oh, coherent pluralism is the one God and the only God and nothing but it, let's bow to it. No, you can be skeptical of coherent pluralism itself and skeptical of these videos and skeptical of Root. And coherent pluralism is a great way to do that, to say, I like some parts of root, but I'm going to make sure I'm pluralistic here and engage with other things. Okay, let's chat about each. So the way I'm thinking about this is, and the way to think about coherent pluralism, but also the other pillars of the root paradigm, networkism and bentoism, is that it is a thing that if all humans would do it, then the networked human organism might be happy. So it's kind of like the golden rule. If everybody does this, then everybody's happy. It works out. And so coherent pluralism is like that, but for epistemology, where we know that there is like kind of a set of rules that we can give ourselves on the left side here. And if we give ourselves those set of rules, they will emerge into this networked human organism that will be a healthy, sustainable being. I like to think of this like our three-part thing here, where we think of the networked human organism as an organism. It uses knowledge, boom, 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 how's the world happening, sense making, and then it does that. It then takes that as input, then does some processing, then makes a decision and uses energy to move atoms in the world, And why does it do that? Well, for the goal, to meet its needs. So this is all about this far left side here, using knowledge and doing sense making. We can think of coherent pluralism as how we as individuals and also how we as the networked human organism should do sense making. How can we understand the world and get knowledge and truth from it? Okay, so I like to think of the big three important pieces for why coherent pluralism is important as, determining truth, the sense making in a networked way, like, oh God, how do we determine what is true? Don't just be post-truth. Second, be empathetic, and then third, be meta. Make sure you're being skeptical of your own mindset and of not becoming a maximalist or orthodox at something. So these three pieces, if all humans are much better at determining truth and empathizing with others and being self-referential and metacognitive, well, things might work out. That's the hope. So let's talk about that first one, the truth / responsible media consumption piece. So again, as a reminder, there's a lot of information out there now. There's bad info and there's good info. And being coherently plural means that when you look at this, instead of looking at this and saying, fake news, nothing is real, who knows, you instead are very good at actively searching for the stuff on the right side, for the good stuff, where you're like, okay, I'm going to try to be pluralistic, search for good things, create coherence among it, and just continue to repeat that. So, we know that our information ecosystem, hopefully, it will get better and will start to look like this, where there's lots and lots of good info. And at the same time, we as humans need to try to make our own consumption patterns look closer to this, even if the amount of information is still hard to find. We should constantly, relentlessly be trying to get good info. As a great example of this, of this mindset for information, there's this great quote from Maggie Coerth from 538. She's talking about masks and whether, the title of this is, hey, scientists don't have a clear answer on masks. This was at the very beginning of COVID. And she says, this great quote, "The expert advice on masks is to get comfortable with not knowing the right answer. You should have some trusted advisors. You should read up on recommendations. But there are a lot of COVID issues where two experts can read the same data and come to different conclusions. For the rest of us, that means accepting that sometimes we'll just have to do the best we can without a clear set of instructions." So what Maggie is saying is, hey, it's good to try to take responsibility, get some trusted advisors, read up on recommendations. And sometimes there's going to be uncertainty there around what is true. It's not just a one-dimensional truth anymore. And so for the rest of us, it means, hey, accepting that you got to do the best you can without a clear set of instructions. You should search for the good stuff, recognize that there's going to be, paradoxes or contradictions within even the good stuff, and then just do the best you can given that uncertainty. Okay, now let's talk about how coherent pluralism helps us empathize. So this is, a lens, but instead of, taking your own lens and lots of different lenses on ideas, this is with people. And there's a great example of this with COVID, where this was a video that some folks in Italy made when they were experiencing at the very beginning of COVID, intense COVID stuff, hospitals being overwhelmed. And they were telling people around the world, especially in the United States, but other places, hey, you should be worried about this, and, they're saying things like, hello, person from 10 days ago, a huge mess is about to happen. We thought it was okay, but now we have these massive numbers. I used to think it was dumb to wear masks, but now we're all stuck at home. And it's still fun, we get out on our balconies, but please stay at home. Like, don't make some of the mistakes we made. I think this is a beautiful example of what we should be trying to do with coherent pluralism, which is to empathize with others, and how our networks allow us to do this. People can just take FaceTime videos, mush them together, and make this beautiful combination that really helps us empathize with people who are further down the COVID epidemic or the COVID pandemic than we were at the time. Empathy is another way to manifest this, the 2x2 of the bento. Instead of only thinking about now me as the only person you can empathize with, no, think about, both your future me, your future self, empathize with them, and also now us and future us, the people in your community and in the world, and then future us, the future generations of humanity. So trying to empathize with all parts of the bento instead of just now me. And finally, there is coherent pluralism as a healthy mindset towards mindsets. So one thing that would be bad is to watch these videos, and I'm hoping to make these videos as helpful as possible. I'm really just trying to be helpful. And you shouldn't look at them and go, oh, wow, this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Instead, you should come with a degree of skepticism and to say, I'm not sure about that. I disagree with you here. What about this other perspective? Trying to make sure that with something like Root, what Root is providing is a lens and a couple different kinds of lenses, but mostly just here's a lens on the world. And while you do that, to say, well, I'm going to bring this lens that I learned from childhood, or I'm going to bring this other lens in, and making sure you can apply coherent pluralism to coherent pluralism. Got to be as pluralistic as possible, especially with scary things like cult-like stuff and extremism and orthodoxy. So, instead of seeing through coherent pluralism, saying, oh, I'm going to put on this lens, and now I'm going to put on this lens. Look at me, I'm doing coherent pluralism. Instead, zooming out from that and viewing coherent pluralism itself as an object and saying, oh, okay, I can view this mindset itself as an object and see how much I want to interact with it. So yeah, what we don't want for the networked human organism is if people didn't have this, then we would get more maximalism and orthodoxy and extremism and cultish behavior. And that's bad. We don't want to, even if something is telling nice truths, we want to make it so that people are coming up and being constantly skeptical of those things and are making sure they're being pluralistic and not becoming too one-dimensional and one-minded. So this is kind of a way to stop orthodoxy and extremism, hopefully. Okay, so that's why it's important. It is something where we can be more curious about ideas and our sense-making, more curious about people and empathizing, and more curious about frameworks and what frameworks we're using. So that is the hope, being, determining truth, empathizing, and being meta. If all humans do that, that would be good. And it's also necessary to do this given our new sense-making environment. Okay. It's important for individuals to search for truth, empathy, and new lenses. What does, this bucket feel like in your body? I feel a sense of definitely excitement and a bit of embarrassment around claiming that if all humans just do these 3 things, we're fine. And also a bit of worry about the meta-ness and making sure we can all, that I both explained it and that folks can naturally get the meta nature of coherent pluralism applied to itself. Okay. Why? Let's be interactive. Why is developing people, making people, growing people up more and more, maturing, why is that important in addition to developing technology? Last time we chatted a lot about how the internet is changing society. Why is it important to upgrade people too? Second question, what is coherent pluralism missing? If everyone is really deeply curious about ideas, people, and lenses, is that enough? What is missing? Or another way to say this is, what is our new golden rule? What should we all do? And if we all did it, it would be great if everybody did it. Okay, so that is what we chatted about today. What is coherent pluralism and why is it important? And integrating your learning, what will it feel like and what things to watch out for? There's going to be a lot more on integrating this into your own daily practice with the 3rd video in the series about how to use coherent pluralism. And I do really want to emphasize that this is more personal to some extent than something like networkism, where this really depends on your age and your reflective practices for how you will feel coherent pluralism within yourself and using it in your life. If these are the first times that you haven't, if you haven't deeply done therapy or haven't really deeply self-reflected, then this is hopefully the start to that path for you. And, also when I was 13 and I heard this, I was still growing up. I was still getting socialized, and that's okay. So just making sure you know where you're at and are present with yourself and gracious to yourself and patient with yourself as you start to do the scary work of understanding your own uniqueness and your own unique lens. Okay, the 3rd point here is, something that you'll start to, as you start to integrate this learning, you'll start to look at the people around you and say, wait a second, why aren't you searching for as much truth, empathy, and new lenses as me? You might get judgmental about them. And this is something where, if some person only consumes from one news source, you're like, is that really best? Or if someone is constantly just demonizing the other side or what have you, or isn't trying to understand people, it's like, could you be more empathetic? Or if someone is really orthodox and like, I am a capitalist and I love capitalism, or I love communism, it's like, shouldn't you be self-reflective about, and understand the pros and cons of your lens and be less orthodoxy-ish? So you'll start to see that in others and be a little bit judgmental, but also the hope is to be curious about it as well. Say, there's lots of good reasons why folks don't do these things, and so to understand where people are coming from, to be empathetic with their situation. And then 4th, I asked this question a second ago, but how can we level up humans given our new technological age? What are our new golden rules? There's a lot of emphasis in society on building new technology. And I think that coherent pluralism starts to hint at the ways that we all as humans need to mature in order to deal with our new socio-technical moment. Thank you for listening. And again, please check out the Root Fellowship. Cool stuff like this happens there. If you don't want to, that's okay. You can be pluralistic and look for a different kind of fellowship, but this one's a cool one. Check us out at root.co. Thank you. Goodbye.